If I wanted a lecture on my moral failures, I just call my mother for free. I don't need to pay to a studio that treats my hobby like a mandatory diversity training module. If the first thing your $50 or $70 game does is accuse you of being a bad person, congratulations, you didn't buy entertainment, you bought a scolding. And somehow you're the villain for returning it. For everyone wondering, I'm definitely not an AI. I'm way too unpolished and drink far too much coffee for a silicon chip to handle. Here's the fast setup. Studios keep shipping games that feel like a committee wrote them during a panic attack. And the moment players bounce, a certain corner of games media pretends the only reason is gamers are toxic. Now, the blunt take. When a product needs a moral hall pass to be enjoyed, the product probably sucks. Punchline time. Imagine McDonald's selling you a cold nugget and then sending you a 12-part thread about your relationship with poultry. You've seen this movie before, just with different skins. A trailer drops, the comments are lukewarm, and the journalists start preheating the excuses, like it's a frozen lasagna. Then launch happens, the numbers faceplant, and suddenly, your wallet is doing hate crimes. Neat trick, right? Let's talk about Concord because nothing says bold new era like a hero shooter arriving to a genre already stuffed like a clown car. The game launched August 2024 and hit an all-time Steam peak of 697 players, which is the population of a medium-sized IKEA on a Tuesday. Sony pulled it offline on September 2024 with refunds, which is basically the corporate version of putting the family dog in a cannon and firing it into the sun. That's not mixed reception. That's a public funeral with a coupon code. And yes, the Steam page looked like a crime scene. SteamDB's charts show the player count flatlining, and the user review split never screamed must play, even before the shutdown turned every match into hide and seek with bots. That's the part defenders skip because numbers don't care about vibes. Numbers don't read op-eds. Numbers just leave. Now here's where the Uvezdom part kicks in. You, the guy on lunch break, just wanted something fun. Them, the PR impress blob, needed the flop to be your fault, because admitting we made a boring game is illegal in California. So, the narrative becomes this. Players didn't show up because the game was attacked, misunderstood, or review bombed. Meanwhile, you're staring at footage that looks like Overwatch cosplay, filmed in a dentist waiting room. And sure, you can find people arguing about pronouns or character designs, because the internet argues about everything, including whether water is political. But the boring truth is more lethal. Concord tried to charge money, in a market full of free-to-play giants, and it didn't bring a killer hook. No hook means no players. No players means the matchmaker becomes a Ouija board. Here's the part that drives me insane. When a game wins, it's the devs listened. When a game loses, it's the community failed the devs. That's like blaming the gym for your deadlift, except the gym didn't ask for money and a battle pass before letting you touch the bar. The gaslight isn't even subtle anymore. It's industrial strength OSHA certified with a warranty. A game launches with clunky combat, floaty movement, and writing that sounds like a corporate apology generator, and the press still says you're obligated to clap because the game has important themes. Brother, my theme is fun. My subplot is not wasting storage space. That's why the whole modern audience thing feels like cryptid hunting. Journalists keep talking about this mythical crowd that doesn't buy games, but definitely dictates what games must be. Developers chase it like Bigfoot, only to find a couple of retweets and a therapist bill. Then they look at you, the actual paying customer, and act surprised you didn't bankroll the experiment. Dragon Age: The Veilguard is the cleanest example of the vibe shift. A series built on messy choices and sharp conflict starts sounding like it's terrified of an HR complaint. Even the discourse got preheated. Critics said woke, defenders said tourists, and the rest of us asked a radical question: is it good to play? David Gaider, the franchise creator, even jumped into the fight and dismissed some critics pretty aggressively, which only poured more gasoline on the argument instead of selling the game. And that's the tragedy. Nobody reasonable is mad that characters exist. People are mad when characters feel like pamphlets in armor. If every conversation sounds like a LinkedIn post about creating safe spaces, you're not writing a fantasy epic, you're writing a compliance training module with swords. I didn't boot up a dragon game to get emotionally audited by a quest giver who speaks in disclaimers. Here's the funniest part. The same outlets that claim representation matters will also pretend gameplay is optional, like you can just vibe on the menu screen and feel socially improved. But you can't. A game is a game. If the moment-to-moment play feels like pushing a shopping cart with one bad wheel, no amount of righteous dialogue is saving it. This is where the money angle lands like a brick. $70 used to mean premium. Now it often means we're charging you to beta test our identity crisis. You pay, you download, you open the store tab, you see 17 currencies, and suddenly, you're working a second job as a digital accountant. Then a critic tells you your frustration is suspicious because only bad people dislike friction. Sure man, and only villains hate parking tickets. Let's pivot to Bungie's Marathon, because this one is a masterclass in read the room, and then do the opposite. Marathon has been described as a hero-based extraction shooter, and that alone made half the internet groan in unison. Bungie has also talked about leaning into tension and uncertainty, like not knowing another player's intentions, which is cool, but it still has to land with people who remember the original Marathon, and wanted, Marathon. Also, the timeline whiplash has been wild. Earlier coverage talked about a closed alpha and a launch window that kept shifting, and more recent reporting points at 2026 release, which is soon enough that everyone is already sharpening their "this will be Concord 2" jokes. And it's not even fair to Bungie, because the meme is bigger than the game. Concord failed so hard, it became a cautionary tale that gets stapled onto anything with heroes, seasons, and a price tag. But notice what happens next. Say, hey, maybe stop pivoting legendary IP into whatever monetizable genre is trending, and somebody will label you anti-innovation. As if innovation means copying Tarkov, sprinkling in abilities, and calling it brave. That's not innovation, that's franchising a mechanic, like it's a Subway sandwich. Even a former Bungie director joked about wanting a new genre name, because extraction shooter feels like naming a genre after a single mechanic, which is funny, but also accidentally honest. Meanwhile, the audience you're defending is busy playing stuff that's simply fun. Wukong didn't need to lecture players about their moral alignment to get attention. It showed combat, bosses, and spectacle, and people said, yeah, I want that. You can argue about its flaws, you can argue about controversies around discourse, but the core point is that it sold the fantasy and delivered a playable loop. Here's the backlash pattern that keeps repeating, and it's not mysterious. Players criticize a game for visuals, pacing, or tone. Then a wave of think pieces arrives, framing that criticism as a social problem. After that, the devs or their defenders go online and pick a fight with the customers, which is the marketing equivalent of spitting in your own tip jar. A recent example outside the big studios, a developer behind a game called Highguard posted a now deleted rant blaming gamers and creators, and the internet reacted exactly like you'd expect when someone points at the crowd and yells, "This is your fault." That's the disconnect. You're buying a product. They're selling a sermon with a launcher. And when the sermon doesn't chart, they don't reconsider the script, they accuse you of illiteracy. It's like being forced to watch a magician who keeps dropping the cards, then being told you hate magic. Let's be super clear, you can write about anything in games. Politics, identity, grief, faith, whatever. The problem isn't the topic, it's the craftsmanship. If the writing is blunt propaganda, players feel it. If the pacing collapses because the story has to stop and do a classroom slide, players feel it. If the combat sucks, players definitely feel it, because your hands are on the controller, not on a philosophy textbook. So why do journalists defend the slop? Because admitting the slop is slop would require them to review games like games. That's harder than grading essays about cultural impact. Also, it would mean they have to stop pretending a purchase is a moral duty. Your credit card isn't a petition signature. Your Steam library isn't a ballot box for ideology. It's a pile of games you play when the world is loud and you want quiet. And yes, some gamers are obnoxious. Some humans are obnoxious, but the industry keeps using the loudest weirdos as a human shield. Criticism about art direction becomes harassment. Criticism about monetization becomes entitlement. Criticism about writing becomes fear. It's like every complaint gets shoved into the same trash bin so nobody has to fix anything. Here's my favorite clown moment. A game ships with characters that look like rejected cereal mascots, and the press insists you're only mad because you can't handle diversity. No man, I can't handle the art director's allergy to style. I'm not scared of diversity, I'm scared of spending money on a game that looks like it was generated by a focus group that's never seen a human face. This is why the wallet vote matters. Not because you're leading a crusade, but because you're a consumer with bills. If a game looks like a preachy mess, you skip it. If the gameplay looks tight, you buy it. That's not activism, that's basic survival. Your rent doesn't accept, but the critic said it was important, as payment. So, when someone calls you a bigot for not buying Concord, or a tourist for being skeptical of Veilguard, or a hater for raising an eyebrow at Marathon, remember what's actually happening. They're trying to turn taste into sin, because sin is easier to argue with than taste. Taste is subjective, sin is a headline, headlines get clicks. Because nothing hits like petty reality, your brain that's already cooked from work. You open a storefront, you see Deluxe Ultimate Founders Whatever Edition, and a trailer where every line sounds like it went through 3 sensitivity passes, and a corporate lawyer. You hover over purchase, then you hear the critic in your head saying, "It's important." Your stomach replies, "So is not regretting this." You close the tab. Somewhere an article gets drafted about how you're afraid of progress. Here's the closing punch. Studios want the culture war to end. Stop recruiting it into patch notes and marketing copy. Journalists want respect. Treat customers like customers, not like villains in a morality play. Developers want players. Earn love with tight gameplay and solid writing, then say the bigger stuff with skill instead of a megaphone. Make it fun and good first. Then, if you want to go ambitious, do it without insulting the people who keep the lights on. Because at the end of the day, you're not asking for a utopia. You're asking for a decent game that doesn't roast you for having standards. And if that's toxic, then congratulations, toxicity is now defined as reading the price tag and thinking, nah, I'm good. Go make your game. I'll make my choice. That's the whole relationship. No activist session, just play or pass, simple, and everyone goes home.